Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at The Bloody Inn from Pearl Games. This is a competitive card game with a very interesting theme. You and the other players are like these rural farm folk in the 1800s who have decided to start an inn, and you are luring guests in to rob them and kill them. Which, if you are a fan of articles from Cracks.com, should not surprise you, because as they have illustrated many times on that site, the past, like ancient history or just somewhat older history, was full of murder all the time. Very easy to get away with it. So it shouldn't surprise you too much. Now, mechanically speaking, this is a really strict hand management and action efficiency game. You only have a couple of actions per turn, and you have a very limited stock of cards to work with. You need to use cards to manipulate other cards. Sometimes that's bribing them, which means you're taking the people that come into your inn as accomplices, like, hey, help me out with my nefarious doings, and I'll pay you. And then you have to pay for those people every round if you hold them in your hand. Or sometimes you turn them into annexes. I'm not quite sure how that works. I think it's like how that kid turned into a car in that old cartoon. But then they give you a constant special ability, and of course, you can murder them, in which case you just get a ton of money, but you can't hold on to too much money. You need to launder that money at some point. Let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game works. Then we're going to come back and let you know what I think. Alright, let me give you a brief rundown of The Bloody Inn. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players. The goal of the game is to have the most French money if you didn't know what a franc was, by the end of the game. And that represents victory points. Now, what's interesting is, and I'll just mention this here, you have this track here where you keep track of your francs during the course of the game, and everyone starts off at 5 francs. I have this set up for a 4-player game. The very maximum you can get is 40. That is the most liquid cash you can have on hand at any time. If you get more than 40 francs while you're at 40, you get nothing. However, you can get these checks, these 10-franc checks. In fact, everyone starts off with one of them. So technically speaking, you start off the game at 15 points. However, this money can be easily spent. And in fact, in some situations, you might actually lose your 10-franc checks as well. But the point is, you're not probably going to win just by having up to 40 points on here. In fact, you just won't. What you're going to need to do during the course of the game is launder money, and that happens when you pass actions. You're then going to be able to convert money off of your track into 10-franc checks, and then you can hold on to those, and that way you can sort of lap the track in a sense and keep going. I just figured I'd mention that here because that's one of the core mechanisms and restrictions of the game. Now, this is the titular inn of the title, and you're going to set up, aside from the scoring track here, and every one of where these keys are is actually a room. Depending on the number of players, you're going to put out a certain amount of keys. There's always going to be a key for every player, and at least some of the empty spots, in this case in a 4-player game, all of them are going to be filled by neutral rooms, which are the gray keys. But those represent rooms that you are kind of like under your control. All it means is that if a guest goes there and stays there for the night, you're going to get a franc. Other than that, it doesn't really mean much. Every player is also going to start off the game with a few different cards here. First, they have a player aid card, which also doubles as a barn, a structure in a sense. It doesn't really do much for you other than you can store a dead body there, which is an important thing we'll get back to in a moment. Every player also starts off with a couple of peasants cards. Now, there's a male and female peasants, but they all do the same thing. This is a good opportunity to tell you about a couple of the systems of the game. Now, on any of the character cards, you're going to have a rank and how much money they're worth when they die. Essentially, how much money they have in their pockets that you steal from them when you bury them specifically, not just when you kill them, because apparently there's a code among thieves that you can't steal from people until you bury them, which is, I guess, I don't know, a game thing. But that's their rank from 0 to 3, and the peasants are always 0, and then how much money they're worth when they die. Hence, on the other side of their card, when you kill them, you flip them over, and if you they maintain their rank, and if you manage to bury them, you'll get this many francs on the track. There is also a first player card. Like I said, you start off with a 10-franc check, and then you have a bunch of other keys of your color. This can matter for some of the different characters that might let you put out other keys actually as their flip side, which is like the hospitality side. I forget the proper name for it, but it's got like bread and mead. Now let me walk you through a round of the game is going to go, and I'll explain things as we go. Now the game is going to end essentially when you've gone through the deck of guest cards twice. Is when you've gone through the deck of guest cards once, you reshuffle, put it back there from the exit pile. And oh, by the way, peasants always go into the bistro when they're discarded. That's an important thing we'll get back to. But any used other cards go into the exit pile. When you have to reshuffle, you reshuffle. And then when you go through the deck again, the game is going to end. You'll finish out that round unless you can't refill. And there's certain things, but for the most part, when you go through the deck a second time, that's going to trigger the end of the game. Whoever the start player is for the round, and that's going to pass clockwise as you go from round to round, is going to first do the welcome guest round. This is where you as the evil innkeepers invite people into the inn to stay, and the start player is going to get to choose where the face-up guests go. They choose which room that they go into. And the strategy here is very subtle. Essentially, you want to put characters that you think are likely to be purchased or killed or whatever, generally removed from the board, in your opponent's rooms, and perhaps characters that you don't think are going to be dismissed easily into your room. That way you get an extra frank at the end of the game. And there might be more subtle reasons based on different character actions that you would do this as well. But one way or the other, you are going to fill up all the different spots where there are keys. And games with less players, not every room is going to have a key, and therefore you're not going to fill up every single room. Next comes the player actions phase. And how this is going to work is that every player is going to get one action, starting with the start player and going around. Then every player is going to get a second action. So every player gets two actions, but they resolve them once and then wait for their turn to come back around again to resolve their second one. When all players have done this twice, that's going to be the end of this phase. Then you're going to move on to the end of round stuff. And I'm just going to run through what the actions are before I show you the cards in particular, just to give you a general scope of what's going on. So what you want to do in this game is get as many franks as possible. The main way that you're going to get franks is by killing people and burying them. That's how you get paid. You rob them after you bury them. But to do that, you need to kill them first, which means you need to have cards. Everything in this game is fueled by cards. So you need to kill them. You need to bury them, which requires you to have an annex, which you have to build, and then you get the money. And in order to facilitate this and make it easier for you, you want to use the special abilities of cards as well. So all of these different things are intertwined. And of course, you need to worry about laundering money in order so you can actually keep taking checks. So the first thing you can do is bribe a guest. When you bribe a guest, you are taking a card from one of the rooms and putting it into your hand. They become an accomplice for you to use your special abilities. To do that, and again, this is going to be the same type of system for all the different types of actions you take. You need to discard cards from your hand equal to their rank. Now, their rank might be 0, like the distiller or the newsboy here, in which case you don't have to discard anything. Or it might be like the distiller or the brewer, where you need to discard 2 or 3 cards because that's what their rank is. Now, there's a couple of exceptional things here. First off, I said you start off with peasants. If you discard peasants, they go back to the bistro. From then on, if there are peasants in the bistro, you can choose to bribe them instead and put them into your hand, either 1 or 2 of them for one action, and they have a rank of 0, so they're always 0. So you can always do something most of the time. But any other character card you discard goes into the exit pile, which might eventually be reshuffled and almost to the end of the game. Also, there are characters who have aptitude in this game. If a character has an icon that matches the action you're trying to do, so in this case, if it's a bribe, it's the blue cards that have a money symbol in the top corner, like the brewer or the newsboy here, then any cards you discard that have that symbol for the action you're trying to take, so if I had taken a newsboy before and I used it to try and bribe someone, I get that card immediately back in hand. So the game encourages you to use cards that match the action you're actually trying to take. So again, bribing a guest means taking one of the guests into your hand as an accomplice to use on later actions. The next thing you can do is build an annex. To build an annex, you have to take one of the cards you already have in your hand as an accomplice, discard cards, again, equal to its rank, and then it becomes a building for you to bury bodies, and anyone can bury a body there. You can bury a body in anyone's building. Or you get to use their special ability. And again, if the cards you discard have an aptitude for building an annex, the red cards with a spade symbol on them, you get to take them right back into hand. Then you can kill a guest. That's another action you can do, which is, again, you're discarding a number of cards equal to the rank of one of the characters that's in one of the rooms, and you're killing them. If you kill them by discarding the appropriate number of cards, and again, if you discard someone that has the gun symbol on them, which is like this happy fellow here, you get to take them right back into hand. But the dead body goes into your play area. It's not buried yet. It's just sitting there, not giving you any money, and in fact, it puts you in danger of being caught by the police if there are any police officers with gun symbols left in the inn by the end of the round. If that happens, then you are going to have to discard those bodies and lose money. More specifically, you lose 10 francs for every unburied corpse that you have by having to bribe the gravedigger to take them away, and you could actually lose checks this way as well. And so that's killing a guest. But then, if you do manage to bury them, the way that you do that is by discarding the cards that have that are purple and have the grave symbol in the top corner. Again, you discard a number of cards equal to the rank of the card that you want to bury, and you put it underneath one of the annexes so that the money is showing. It could be one of your annexes, or it could be another opponent's. If it's one of yours, you immediately get all the francs that you have coming to you. In this case, it would be 26. You move up the track that many spaces if you can. If it's one of your opponent's buildings, you have to split the money with them. So that is definitely something to note. But sometimes it's better to do that if you're getting closer to the end of the game and you know there's no chance of you burying that body otherwise. The last type of action you can do is actually not keyed into one of the cards, and it is simply passing. It's saying that you don't want to do any of those other actions, but when you pass, that is the chance that you have to launder money. You can launder as many francs as you have on the track in quantities of 10 into 10 franc checks, or vice versa. If you are out of cash and you want to spend that to pay your accomplices, then you can transfer a 10 franc check into 10 francs on the track. Finally, you have the end of round stuff. Again, if there's a police investigation where they see you have unburied bodies, you're going to have to pay for that. Any guests that are still in the inn get discarded into the exit pile. If there were any guests left over in player rooms, they get a franc as wages. And then you actually have to pay the wages for your accomplices. You have to pay 1 franc for every accomplice you still have in your hands. Let's take a look at some of those other accomplices just so you have a general idea of some of the special abilities and things. So you have the newsboy, who's a 0 rank. You immediately earn a franc per blue annex you have built, including this one when you make him into an annex. The mechanic reduces the cost of all of your annexes from then on by 1. The count, you immediately earn 9 francs. The bishop, you immediately earn 4 francs. At the end of the game, you earn 4 francs per purple card in the exit stack. And here's an example of one of the kill cards, the police officers, the brigadier chief. He's a rank of 2 and gives you 18, but other than that, you can't make him into an annex. His only purpose is to be very adept at killing things. So any card can be used to discard to kill things, but he comes right back into your hand if you use him in order to do so. And that is essentially the game. You are always using cards to fuel other cards. You're taking accomplices to make into annexes, and then killing people to bury them in your annexes, and then getting money and trying to convert that money into francs. And whoever has the most money at the end of the game is going to be the winner. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Now, overall, I think the Bloody Inn is a very clever game, has some very interesting mechanisms, and I really do like the theme and the art style a lot, and I do not like the game that much at all. Let's break it down from start to finish. So the theme and the artwork, this is what, of course, got the most attention for the game, and I'm glad because I think that those are the best parts about it. I love the artwork. It's very cool looking. It's very unique looking than anything else I've seen or that I have in my collection. And also, although I think I have seen this particular style in some other type of game, it's escaping me, though, at the moment. But the theme as well, yes, it's very dark, but it's not like it's right in your face all the time. There's no gore in this game at all or anything like that. And I guess it technically could be anything. You could just be bringing guests in and selling them things or whatever the case might be. But they decided to go with the darker theme, and I think that's a good idea. I like to see at least a unique spin on things. And there are some thematic elements here as well. The fact that you can bribe the guests. I don't know what turning them into an annex is supposed to represent other than I guess it's a rural farm town and you pay them to build something in your town and then they're still your accomplice, something like that. But the whole idea of using people who are adept at certain things and then you get to use them again, they're really skilled at that, and also using them to kill some of the other patrons and then having to bury the bodies. Grim as that might be, it actually is pretty thematic, and I appreciated that about the game. Now, with all that said, what don't I like about it? Well, the game is incredibly tight. It's an action efficiency game, and essentially you have very, very few actions you can do during the course of the game. And my big issue is that I never felt like I was getting stronger, getting better at the game as I progressed through it. I never felt like I was setting up some awesome combos and things, or that if I did, it took a tremendous amount of effort and the game was over at that point. First and foremost, the game recommends or has recommendations for a short game or long game, depending on the number of cards you take out of the deck. Always do the long game. It's not that much longer, and without that extra time, I really feel like it's even worse as far as not letting you feel like you're building up an engine and getting things accomplished. You need that extra time. In fact, I wish it was a little bit longer. I very, very rarely say that about games, but I feel that way in this case. Number of players doesn't affect anything too much. I played it with 2 players and with 3 players, and I felt that the 3-player game was maybe a little bit more interesting, but you don't have a ton of interactivity with the other players. Yes, when it's your turn, when you're going first, you can manipulate how the guests come into each room, but I always felt that was kind of like some false decision making. It never seemed that critically vital to me. I know that there's some nuance there, but it wasn't tremendously important whether someone hung out in my room and gave me an extra franc or not. But everything in the game just felt so restrictive to me. Okay, I have to use these. I like cards games where cards can be used for multiple things. But in this case, it's okay, I have to use my cards to bribe people, then I have to use my cards to make them into other annexes, and then I have to use my cards to kill people, and if I don't happen to get the right cards that come back to my hand immediately, I am there's an old and very gross expression, but shoveling S against the tide is what I felt about that at times, because it was wow, it doesn't feel like I'm getting ahead here until I focused on getting the cards that gave me discounts on everything, and then I'm well, okay, now I feel like I can actually do something. But again, while you're doing that, the other players might just be well, I'm just going to kill people as fast as I possibly can and get money that way, and I do feel like that's probably the better way to go. At which point, some of these other mechanisms in the game that are encouraging engine building feel kind of ancillary. They're superfluous. And especially the cards that give you extra points or extra francs for as the round goes on, or during certain phases, or when at the end of the game, whenever certain cards are in the exit pile, you might get extra bonuses. Those things didn't feel as important to me. It was just kill people, get money, bury them as quickly as you possibly can. You do need some annexes, yes, obviously, but sometimes you might just get lucky and the cops don't come out. So, and so in which case you can kind of delay burying them until closer to the end of the game. So annexes and killing people seems to be the most important things, and sometimes you just are forced to annex something that's not that important and useful to you. I don't know. It just felt like I was always struggling to do something. Always struggling for what is essentially a very light game. There's also the whole aspect of, if this was just straight up victory points, I do this, I get points, ta-da. There's the whole aspect of laundering money, which is to say, you can't just get an infinite amount of money, which is essentially victory points in the game. You have to launder it, turn it into checks. That just seems like another added thing onto the game just to make you struggle just that much more. It's why? Why do we have to do this? So it's a tough one for me because I do like some of the mechanisms. I love games that let you use cards as multiple things. I like the theme. I like the artwork. But I just felt like it was more of a chore to play this than I wanted it to be, especially for something that's supposed to be so light and direct. So didn't really work for me. Other people I played it with liked it a bit more, though, I will say that. And it seems to be getting quite a lot of buzz. Definitely as far as theme and artwork goes, it's solid, but I just wish there was a little less restrictive during the course of the game, at least for my tastes. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.